60 seconds.
All righty. So we're good to go.
Almost. 1 second. Sorry, hon.
No problem.
Yes, you are good to go.
We are good to go. All right. Good evening, beautiful souls. CBD Genie here. Welcome to the Texas Normal Virtual Open Meeting. Before I get started, I'd like to thank Texas Normal for having me as the moderator, and shout out to the speakers joining us this evening for their time and their knowledge. It's always a pleasure to keep the cannabis science conversation going, so I'm looking forward to tonight's talk. An overview of what to expect this evening. I'll start us off by introducing myself and doing a little cannabis science intro. Dr. Leah will be talking about Delta 8 and where it comes from, so medical professionals in the house. Geoff Young will be talking about CO2 extraction and how it took him from the battlefield to the hemp industry. So Air Force veteran chemist in the house. We'll have some time for some Q&A immediately after both of our speakers, so be ready for that. Jax Finkel will keep us up to date with cannabis policy during the Texas legislative session that is currently going on, so shout out to the cannabis family. And at the end, I'll come back, wrap it up, and we'll have some final thoughts. So, for those of who may be tuning in for the first time, I am the CBD Genie, cannabis science communicator. And today, a lot of Americans are celebrating Cinco de Mayo. As for me, May 5th has an additional meaning. May 5th marks my 4-year anniversary in the public cannabis space. I flew to my first cannabis farm in Oregon back in 2017, and that's where my journey began. Cannabis not only brought my body to balance, having ulcerative colitis, which is just an outrageous imbalance of inflammation of the large intestines, but it opened my eyes to my diet, to self-sustainability, regenerative practices, and respect for Mother Earth and all that she provides. And there's a science behind all of that. And if you're new to the cannabis space here in Texas or anywhere for that matter, it's nice to find common ground with others so that you can open up to them. And just like a genie manifests into many forms, I too wear a few hats in the industry. I'm an 8.5-year Air Force veteran, 14-year to present medical professional, a patient with cannabis testimony, activist, and advocate. So let's get connected. You can find me on Instagram at cbd.genie, and you can look for the abstract meditating pose. So cannabis science communicator, what does that even mean, right? Well, it means that I'm the liaison between Mother Earth and the science behind her elements and compounds and microbiome. All the questions that you have, I've had. So since everyone is asking molecular questions nowadays, right? Tetrahydrocannabinol, THC, cannabidiol, CBD, the latest Delta 8, right? These are all phytocannabinoids or molecules. So we need to have cannabis science conversations. It's important to remember, cannabis is not new. It's been used for thousands of years across the globe, but the science with data and identifying phytocannabinoids is fairly new, and we will continue to learn as technology provides the means for molecular diagnostics. CBD has been a popular phytocannabinoid lately here in Texas and across the globe. But did you know that according to the United States Patent Trademark Office, USPTO.gov, the isolation of CBD, the application, was filed in 1940 by organic chemist Dr. Roger Adams, and it was published in 1942 as patent 2304669. That's over 80 years ago, ladies and gentlemen. So he also isolated other phytocannabinoids as well, but he did so in using chemistry. So keeping in mind that there are over 100 identified phytocannabinoids, and we'll continue to learn them as we grow. But right now, the latest compound in the spotlight is Delta 8 THC. And I'm all about show and tell, and I've made these molecules and I've showed them on my page before, but because the topic is Delta 8 THC, I would like to revisit the molecular structures since we're about to go there. We're about to take it to the science. This right here is Delta 9 THC, named as such because the double bond is found on the 9th carbon chain. Delta 8 THC is named such because the double bond is found on the 8th carbon chain. Now, this small difference, because these molecular structures, they have the same molecular formula. They both have 21 carbon, they both have 30 hydrogen, and these little red dots right here, that's the oxygen. They both have 2 oxygen. The thing is in biochemistry, your structure determines your function. And this slight structural difference, even though they have the same molecular formula, will bring on a different response with the human body. Everybody responds differently anyways, but the reason why you'll have a different response is because of that structural difference. So to help us understand the latest compound in the spotlight, Delta 8 THC, I will now introduce our first speaker. Dr. Leah Johnson, known to the cannabis community as Dr. Leah, is formally trained clinical cannabis pharmacist and the owner and CEO of Alchemist Consulting. She is also an accomplished, highly driven clinical long-term care and rehabilitation pharmacist with primary focus in pain, mental health, and sexual health medication management. She also holds 3 patents for natural herbal remedy tinctures, which she helped develop as the head of research and development for an herbal supplement company. Dr. Leah believes that complete physical and mental health, well-being can be influenced by the utilization of cannabis, as well as other herbal remedies and supplements, in conjunction with pharmaceutical medications. She believes that most patients are given too many and inappropriate prescription medications while not being given the knowledge for utilizing effective herbals and supplements to reduce pill burden. She also believes that many patients are unable to get full relief of their ailments due to the missing components in their medication regimen. In an effort to improve the overall health and well-being of patients, Dr. Leah works with patients and their healthcare providers from all over the country to reduce the amount of medications taken, alter timing and dosing of medications to improve effectiveness, and identify medications which could be causing issues. She also works with cannabis companies to advise them on dosing, safety, interactions, and how to better help their customers see health improvements with the use of their products. She also holds a doctorate degree in pharmacy from the Massachusetts College of Pharmacy and Health Sciences. Please welcome Dr. Leah.
Hey, thanks so much, Anita. Thank you for such a great intro. Would you like me just to get started in the info about Delta 8?
Yes, ma'am. The stage is all yours.
So for those who I've worked with and know me in the industry, again, I'm Dr. Leah. The biggest thing I believe that education and information is the most valuable thing we can have in this industry, especially with, so much information that we're getting bombarded with. So I really believe in transparency. So really my biggest focus today was to go over what Delta 8 really is, where it comes from, and a little bit more information about it. So first off, Delta 8, a lot of people believe Delta 8 is actually a grown product. Delta 8 is actually not, it does exist naturally in the plant, but in very, 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 very insignificant amounts that cannot actually be grown to a useful amount to be utilized by a patient. So what ends up happening is, and it's actually the conversion from THC to CBN. So for those who, THC is delta 9, CBN, for those of you that might not know, is a phytocannabinoid that is found naturally in plants once the plant has actually gotten oxidated. And what happens is the CBN is very effective for sleep. It's great for sleep. So delta 8 is actually a chemical that gets produced naturally in the plant along the way, but again, in a very, very, very small ratio. So the way that delta 8 in products are made is it actually needs to be synthesized. And for the most part, they utilize CBD flower to do this. And what they do is they take CBD flower and they soak it in sulfuric acid or acetic acid, depending on who's making it. And these are the solvents that are usually used to make delta 8. And then if you let CBD flower sit in the solvent for about 3 hours or so, you're going to start seeing a higher percentage of THC, and the CBD will actually go down and THC goes up, and a couple of the other phytocannabinoids you'll see will slowly increase as well. Once you actually let it sit in that solvent for about a couple weeks, you see that the amount of THC will actually decrease, and then that will lead it to the progression of getting to your delta 8. So again, delta 9 to delta 8, or CBD to delta 9 to delta 8. So when you have delta 8, it is a synthesized form, and it needs to be that way because, again, it's not easily produced in the plant at high quantities. So the most important thing you need to remember about delta 8 is you need to make sure the products that you're getting of delta 8 are properly washed out. So if you're able to see a tincture or a liquid of delta 8 and you're seeing a green color, like a bright green or a bright purple or a red or a brown, most likely those solvents have not been washed out properly. So make sure to avoid any sort of liquid tinctures you see with delta 8 that has these colors, unless for some reason they've indicated that they've added food coloring with it. With most cannabis products, they don't. And that's just for safety, to make sure that you're ingesting a product that does have the solvent fully washed out, because no one really wants to ingest sulfuric acid. It's not usually recommended. So it's probably a good thing if you make sure it's fully washed out. If it is washed out, you're going to see more of a kind of a very light yellow, a very, very, very light green, kind of what you would see in a basic CBD tincture, for example. So it's the number one of the things is that you need to watch out for is making sure that the solvent has been fully, fully, fully washed out. Once you make sure it's washed out, you got to make sure that once it's being utilized and properly washed out, you know that it's at least on a chemical level for the solvents, you know that it is safer. The one thing I always want to mention to patients, though, is that delta 8 is one of the very few products, specifically phytocannabinoids, that has not actually been tested in therapy. It hasn't been there haven't been actual studies yet in any country, not just the United States. Of course, we have a deficiency of studies, but even in other countries, delta 8 has not been tested for safety, and it has not been tested for effectiveness. And so I'm not saying, oh my God, you should absolutely not do it. But I always want to give a warning. Again, I like full transparency. The most important thing you should be focusing on is, if I'm going to use delta 8, am I making sure that the source I'm getting it from is reputable enough where I can make sure that they're testing it and they're making sure there is all the solvent that has been extracted is removed fully from the product. And then once we do that, then, it's kind of like for lack of better terms, enter at your own risk, because it could be, we don't know the side effects of long-term use of it. And that doesn't mean it's wrong, it's bad. We didn't know a lot of the side effects of cannabis that had been used for thousands of years before we actually started testing it. So I'm not saying, oh my God, it's terrible, don't use it. But I'm also saying, be careful. Be careful out there. Be careful with all products, even non-delta 8 products, because you want to make sure you're getting it from a reputable place that does the due diligence, make sure that they take care of the product properly, and make sure it's safe for the end user.
That is awesome. I'm so glad you're able to say that. And you know what? A lot of questions are coming in as you've been speaking. I don't know if we want to pivot a little bit and maybe ask one or two questions real quick, just because.
Anita, I think that's a great idea because we have some on Facebook too. In addition, okay. I'd love to just kind of riff if Geoff's okay on that.
And we still have technically till 8:25, so let's do that. So let's see the first one, or let's see, or can you help me out with the ones on Facebook?
Sure. So I have a couple that I made notes here on Zoom and from Facebook. So first question is, you know, one of our watchers, Paul, uses CBD isolate to transmute into the Delta 8. So are there several different ways that you can change the product into Delta 8?
I mean, it's the same, whether you're using flower, you're still using CBD. So it's CBD flower, CBD isolate, CBD extract. It's still the CBD that the sulfuric acid or acetic acid, if you use that one, is chemically converting to that thing. So it's no matter where you're getting the CBD from, it's the same starting product that you're still using. So it's kind of like, you know, if you're going to make a tomato sauce, if you use, you know, fresh tomatoes versus non-fresh, you know, versus, you know, freshly picked tomatoes versus canned tomatoes, it's still at the end of the day going to make tomato sauce. It might come out slightly better using one versus the other, but at the end of the day, it's all a chemical process to convert the CBD to the Delta 8.
Okay, and David on Facebook is asking, so the CEO of Compassionate Cultivation was talking about Delta 8 with the local Spectrum News and saying that Delta 8 is legalized recreational use of cannabis in Texas and that it should be regulated like THC through the program. Do you agree with that assertion?
I don't necessarily, like, I have my own issues with THC in general, like with you know, the lack of access to THC in general, but my biggest thing is safety, and I would much rather see THC be available than Delta 8 just because of the lack of safety profile that we have. I do think it should be looked into more for the regulation, because the reason why people are having issues with THC in general is the fact of the psychoactive effect. And yes, if you use it in, you know, and if you dose it differently, you actually won't get a psychoactive effect, but that's for another time. But the biggest thing is that we really need, you know, if the impairment that the Delta 8 is causing is a similar impairment that the THC is causing, it kind of needs to be in the same bubble. I'm not saying that, you know, I mean, I understand that, like, it's become a loophole, which gets people to allow, but if I had my way, I would say, drop the Delta 8, get the THC approved, because
Absolutely.
THC is very well known. It's very well studied. It's got great, fantastic new research coming out, even about Alzheimer's. And, you know, so that's why I think instead of finding the loopholes, I think that they need to allow THC in Texas.
Wonderful. I agree. So another question was about that sulfuric acid that you talked about. So they were kind of wondering, is it a binder or is it something that is decarboxylating in some manner? Is it so it's a chemical conversion of some sort? What is it converting?
So I have to be honest, I don't know what it's not a decarboxylation, because a decarboxylation is, or it could be a slight decarboxylation, but the decarboxylation is usually taking the acid form and converting it with heat, usually, to the active form. So THCA to THC, CBDA to CBD. But with this, it's an actual chemical reaction. It is actually something that is causing the plant to continue the process that it would normally go throughout the plant cycle. And so, to be honest, again, I don't know directly what the chemical reaction actually is. Anita, I know that's kind of more your territory to watch the little structures come together to show what it goes into. But it is an actual chemical reaction. It's not as simple as just decarboxylation or oxidation. It's an actual chemical reaction to get it, utilizing the sulfuric acid to get it to change into the delta 8.
Okay. And Jackie is wondering, which this is super important, how do you determine what's reputable right now? She's asking about standardization, quality control.
Absolutely.
You know, a previous questioner was saying, you know, should the teacup licensees, you know, potentially be in charge of this? I don't know, you know, if you know this, Dr. Johnson, but our consumable hemp products are regulated by the Department of State Health Services. Oh. And they've overall had really fairly thoughtful legislation. And so to me, you know, Delta 8 being under their control, being under the age of 21, you know, it wouldn't have access like with alcohol and nicotine. Would that help standardize it, or is there already standardization there?
No. To be honest, so the biggest problem is that there's not really any. Now, again, I don't know. I'm from California, so Texas regulations are a little bit different from ours. But the biggest thing is the labs. You have to be able to trust in the labs, and there are many labs you cannot trust. So that's the biggest problem. Is what I recommend is you need to find first a reputable company. And the best way to do that is go on their website, ask for C of A's, which is our certificates of analysis, and really get down and to see, you know, if they look like they're only testing one thing here, one thing there, you look at a couple different, they only have one certificate analysis for all of their products. You know, these are the things you want to look for, because you really need a reputable lab, and to know so once you see that they're reputable on their other products, such as, you know, their CBD products, or their, well, at this point, for Texas, their CBD products, then you can say, okay, I've seen many of their assays. I've seen an assay is a chemical breakdown of what's in the product. So I've seen their certificate of analysis. I've actually, you know, they've listed where the grow comes from. They've listed how the extraction happens, and they are just very straightforward, transparent, and have all that information in front of you. And then you're able to say, you know, they're very reputable. You still want to be slightly hesitant, just because, you know, in the law, even the best look, you know, could fake it. So you never really know. But all in all, I would say if you trust to trust the lab is to trust, or trust the product is to trust the lab that's testing the product. And you really want to see that they're making an effort, and then they can show everything that they're testing it for and how it compares from batch to batch to batch. If you're seeing that, you can at least have some sort of comfort knowing that they are, you know, trying to do their due diligence to prove the efficacy and safety of the product, or at least safety of the product.
And just a note to anybody who is listening right now, if you use Delta 8 products, even if you use some CBD products, you can come up with a positive THC urinalysis. And if that would be a problem in your life, you need to really consider that. One last question real quick. So how do you wash out these products? What does this mean? Tell us more.
So I apologize. So I am not, I was a chemist in my old life. And so washing out, it's not water. There's actually what they usually use, and again, for sulfuric acid, I personally don't remember the process, but there is actually a process where you utilize other chemicals to actually kind of dilute the product from it. It's almost like it's another process where you're actually extracting the solvent away from the product. So they call it a washout, but in general, it's not water or washing it out. It's actually using other chemicals to pull out the chemical that is there that you're not looking for. And it can be done very well. And sometimes it's very time consuming. So sometimes, you know, if you're rushing the process or trying to go through it faster, then you're going to end up with that, you know, incorrect coloring and incorrect, the incorrect, the incorrect product. I also want to say one more thing. A lot of people have said, well, I see Delta 8 flower all the time, so obviously it's grown. So that's also a misconception. Delta 8 flower is actually just CBD flower that's been sprayed, or if it's a powdery form of Delta 8, it's actually just been added to like salted on the flowers. Sprinkled on the flowers. So it's either sprayed or sprinkled. Spray seems to be more common because it actually sticks better to it. But all in all, if you're actually utilizing Delta 8 flower, you're actually utilizing CBD flower with Delta 8 sprayed or sprinkled onto the CBD flower.
And we see that on pre-rolls as well here, where it's a hemp pre-roll and it's been then rolled in Delta 8, we'll just call it keef, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I think, I think we've covered most of the questions here, and we can maybe come back to it if you want, Dr. Johnson, but this has been super. I mean, I had questions myself. I knew that there was a process and that it wasn't totally synthetic, but it wasn't exactly straight from the tap, if you will. So
exactly. Yeah, I'm happy to, like I said, I was a scientist in my past life, and with time, it kind of like the chemicals go out, and maybe Geoff might even be a great person to like talk to us about that, because he's definitely more into the sciencey world of it.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Leah. I really appreciate that. I already knew that this was going to be a very hot topic, because in Texas, that is a hot product right now, a hot commodity, from gummies to, you name it, to the flower, everything we've been discussing just right now. So thank you for just helping us keep the cannabis conversation going, because we're all learning right now. This is a learning process for everyone, especially in Texas too, because we know where this state stands, everyone. I'm not going to get into that, but let's go ahead and keep on going. And I want to introduce our next speaker, Geoff Young. He was a logistics NCO in the U.S. Air Force, and Geoff was a hazmat handler with specialties in explosives and nuclear materials. After a 6-year enlistment with 4 tours spanning 26 months spent overseas, including Iraq and Afghanistan, Geoff returned to his home state of Texas to earn a chemistry degree from the University of Texas at Austin. There he performed research synthesizing inorganic lanthanide complexes, utilizing NMR spectroscopy, crystallization, and X-ray crystallography, ultimately producing over a half a dozen previously unknown molecules. Following graduation, Geoff managed and operated the extraction and processing laboratories for the first legal Texas cannabis dispensary under the Compassionate Use Program. Once the House Bill 1325 formally legalized hemp and over-the-counter CBD products in Texas, Green Zero Labs was conceptualized based on Geoff's long history with heavy regulatory oversight and medical standard cannabis laboratory procedures. Please welcome Geoff Young.
Hello, thanks for having me. I appreciate the good intro. I don't know, as you were reading, Dr. Leah, I was like, man, you're gonna make me follow her. Like this is not gonna be good. And I tried to chime in the chat with a couple of quick answers without cutting in on the D8 conversation, but I'm pretty sure the QA is gonna circle back to that. So where are we at? I guess mainly on my side of things, it's exactly like you hit on the head. The Air Force prepped me a lot for oversight. I had no idea what it was for. I was very much the guy like, all right, I'm doing this to go back to school. How am I going to do it? What am I going to do? Coming back to Texas, like maybe it's petroleum. I knew I wanted to get into STEM. And yeah, I just got really lucky falling backwards into the timing of the Compassionate Use Program going into effect right as I was walking across the stage getting that degree. And having that military background, an interest in cannabis, it really fits well with more the Austin than Texas culture of that tie-dye and cowboy boots, culture conflict and meshing. So it's definitely been an interesting journey to see, both the medical, the recreational, the legal dominoes falling and the perfect storms that we're seeing develop.
Nice.
Excuse me, so dry throat. But yeah, so I worked in the first extraction lab, and to touch on CO2 specifically, because there are definitely 3, there's more, but there's 3 primary extraction techniques. I guess 4 if you count the physical rosin presses as well. But as far as CO2, which we use, is very, very prominent in the medical community as far as safety. It's endorsed by the Mayo Clinic. It's primarily, because it's non-hazmat, it's food grade material. We use basically what you would hook up to a beverage fountain. And then being able to put that under pressure, CO2 is an awesome, it's cheap. After the fact, the equipment is super expensive, but it's a really, really interesting technique, because when you put it under extreme pressure, CO2 is a symmetrical nonpolar molecule, but when you put it under pressure, you can kind of bend it just a little bit and give it a little bit of that dipole moment, and that allows you to pull out the solubility profile of your target. And yeah, no, I mean, it's awesome stuff. The other side of it, I'd say ethanol is very similar to end product quality. It's a little bit more issue as far as safety and hazmat on the operators themselves. So we chose CO2 just for product safety and our own employees, and just less hazmat, less to deal with. And then you have hydrocarbons at the end. I'll be pretty brief with that because it's more or less self-explanatory when you're dealing with explosives. When you're dealing with, I mean, butane, propane, things that you just don't want to put in your body. And exactly like Dr. Leah was touching on the Bronsted acids that are used to isomerize Delta 8, you really want those residual solvent panels on your COA to ensure that you're not going to have that end up in your body. And touching on the differences between, I'm not as versed in California, because I mean, every state is kind of different on what COAs, what the recreational side is regulated as. So Texas does require a full panel COA, including residual solvents. And if they don't have it, if they can't produce it, for those that asked earlier of how you can find a reputable lab or a reputable business, fill in the blank. If they can't answer what's on the COA, go down the list of, exactly like Dr. Leah was saying, multiple products should all, and batches should have individual COAs as well. And there's some weird exceptions to that it's really frustrating how complicated it can be sometimes. For example, we make about a 15 kilo batch lot of our distillate, of our concentrates. We'll do our full panel safety on that, make sure we don't have any heavy metals, mycotoxins, any of the other safety testing. And once that passes, we consider that an umbrella, and then we'll make products, generally diluting with organic MCT oil, and then we produce a potency COA for each individual one to show the cannabinoid breakdown in each one, and the concentration, the dosage. And then at that point, you get into the literacy of comparing percentages, milligram per milliliter dosage. And I don't know, it's funny on the science side, as much as we think it's automatic. You memorize these things and you don't think twice about them. And we really stump ourselves like, man, we're throwing too much information at you in a short period of time. It is extremely hard to educate people responsibly and allow them to absorb it in a really palatable manner. So it's an uphill battle, but I mean, it'll come with time. And luckily we have the interest and the enthusiasm of both the consumer side and the producers. So that's, it's awesome to be in such a, I mean, positive industry. I love it.
Absolutely.
We have a question or two on the Facebook. Can I interject, Anita? Would that be okay?
Let's do it.
Okay, so Geoff, we're talking percentages, but we're also talking milligrams. So that requires math. and can density. Yeah, and that can be hard for people, right? So can you talk to us about what is the difference between, like, if I'm getting a hemp product with 0.3% THC versus how many milligrams are in there? Can you explain that a little bit?
Of course. So, I mean, whether you're looking at a broad spec, an isolate, a full spectrum, which on the chemical side, we have more extensive definitions, but usually that refers to the THC and minor cannabinoid inclusions. But exactly like you were saying, say 0.3%, and this is very important, especially on our brand, we sell full spectrum, and we put a disclaimer on there. I mean, this is going to make you fail a drug test. Be very, very aware of it. But for example, I mean, 0.3%, if you look at a 1 ounce bottle, which converts to roughly 30 milliliters, the density of water it's not exactly the same with MCT and coconut oil. There is a slight difference, but for shorthand notation, it's usually 1-to-1 on milliliters to grams. So when you look at 5% of 30 grams, that's 1,500 milligrams. So that's one of the most common dosage concentrations you'll see is 5% is equal to roughly 1,500 milligrams per ounce. And then when you look at a percentage wise, it's really just about moving the decimal point. So if you're looking at 0.3%, you have 3 milligrams per milliliter. And again, I mean, it's really hard to memorize that. And I literally have it on my dry erase board at work. I've memorized this for years, but whether it's my staff, whether it's tours, whatever, at a glance, I mean, to have just that information and that note there, like, okay, we're still there. We're still remembering that, I mean, 1.66666% is 500 milligrams per ounce, if I'm remembering that correctly. But yeah, that it's those little snappy conversions that we know off the top of our heads, but as consumers and the differences in packaging, because we're required to give dosage, but it doesn't say how. So this thing on the shelf next to another one may communicate that information in a different way. And yeah, we try, again, we could try to give you all the information, and then usually it ends up into a too long didn't read situation. And we try to pick our spots and do our best. The QR codes and the URLs are infinitely valuable on your product labels. That's where you really want to go if you want to do a deep dive, specifically starting with the COA, but beyond that, of really looking into how much information that company and that brand is going to present to you on that product.
Yeah, and to just riff on the percentage for one more second, to like give perspective, you know, doctors in Texas can prescribe whatever milligram of THC and CBD they want to prescribe to a patient. But when the patient's fulfilling their prescription, as it is now with 0.5%, for them to reach that dosage, sometimes they're having to take, you know, like 8, 9, 10 eyedroppers of MCT oil, which have side effects, which are actually worse than the side effects of using the cannabis oil. So if they change to 5%, it would be more like 1 or 2 eyedroppers. So what is the effect that most people see from MCT oil, and how can we better equip people to dose appropriately without this overreach of regulation?
So this is, very, very complex question. And I'll try not to get into too much self-promotion, because our company did just put out a 1-to-1-to-1 over-the-counter product for THC.
I have it right here. Funny you mentioned
awesome. That. So specifically, and again, I'll leave it at that, because when we look at 0.5%, 0.3%, if hopefully we get this 5% cap increase, what they're actually legislating is the carrier oil. Exactly like you said, we can give you any milligrams of Delta-9 as long as it's hemp derived, and under that 0.3, it's federally and state compliant. If you want 50 milligrams of Delta-9 THC, we can give it to you legally. But exactly like you said, you're drinking some MCT oil with that. I mean, there's other dilutes as well. There's hemp seed oil, safflower oil is great as if you have a nut allergy. But again, MCT oil, because it's seen as a health supplement on its own, is going to be the most common. And I don't know if you saw me chuckle when you asked what the side effects are, but this was my education into it, was exactly like you're saying, these smaller bodied pediatrics that are taking large doses. And the number one complaint for the first couple of weeks of taking it is diarrhea. MCT oil is a natural laxative. Once you get it into, there's a lot of keto diets, a lot of things that'll say take a spoonful up to 100 milliliters, which is excessive, per day. But once you get it into your system and your digestive tract gets used to it, that'll definitely peter out. But definitely expect to use the bathroom regularly if you're taking large doses of MCT oil early on. That is, and there's other ways, there's other dilutants and things that we're working on to work around that, both on the medical and over-the-counter side. So like beeswax chewing gum, or like I said, other carrier oils. I'm not a huge fan of gummies as far as the sugar, different emulsifiers, like a lot of additives that, we're trying to aim for a health product, and we don't want this to be something that's going to rot your teeth and upset your stomach. So trying to get all those ducks in a row is very hard to do on the manufacturing side, while also figuring out like, hey, we have to add X amount of weight to this product legally. Like that's the law says, hey, we have for every X milligrams of THC, we have to put X milligrams of something else in there. So what's going to be the best and healthiest way to do that until those legal dominoes fall and we can stop playing games?
Yeah, the gummies are not so great if you have the diabetes. So
yes.
I definitely understand that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Jess is asking about the COAs. So, you know, what should a COA look like? What are we looking for? And when you ask a dispensary for it, you know, what should we expect their response to be?
So the dispensary should have it ready to show you immediately, whether it's a digital or physical copy. If they can't show it to you, don't buy it, period. They are required by law to have that. And the amount of compliance, it's unfair to DSHS because this, in the middle of a pandemic, is thrown on their plate. They're under-resourced, understaffed. We are doing a lot of self-policing in this industry, and the third-party lab oversight really adds to that a lot. So there's a handful of really reputable labs. New Bloom is who we're using currently, and I love them. I don't want to get into endorsements of stuff, but there's different forms of how it'll look, and they're based on your scientific literacy, you may not necessarily understand what you're looking at. So usually what I try to communicate to people is look for red flags. And by red flags, I mean, you're going to look at the name of the company that it's for. If it wasn't manufactured by that company or sold by that company, are they wholesaling it through them and then not producing another COA? When was this product tested? Was it done at the flower or the distillate stage and not the final product stage? When you look at pixelation, usually that means you got a screenshot and somebody altered it, copied and pasted. And laboratory documents are absolutely legal documents and do not stand for fraud. That is a felony. And if somebody alters that COA, copy and pasted, look for the dates that it's done, look for matching fonts, look for different shading on the paper. There's a lot of those things that you can spot. And Dr. Leah said, I mean, there's one specific of when you go to a website and there's one COA and they have 50 products, immediate red flag. I'm not touching anything that they make. And again, I'm horribly over Boy Scoutish about it. Because of my rapid re-education into the cannabis community came with pediatrics and the medical side. So if I wouldn't give it to a child in a wheelchair, I'm not putting it in my own body or selling it. So I go to the extreme levels. And yeah, it's not easy, and it's not something we can expect everybody to do. So sorry, yeah, I don't know, that was a little bit too much, but it's hard.
No, that's good. That's good. And you know, so we're talking about THC, but also there's a question about CBD. So like, what are the therapeutic effects of CBD isolate? And I'm adding this on personally. Sure. CBD isolate, can you test positive in a UA?
That depends on the purity. By definition, if CBD isolate is truly CBD isolate, you should not test positive. But to be safe, it's up to you. That's a user risk. There's always a risk. If you're going to take it, nothing is 100%. It may be 99.999999%, but you don't want to be that exception to the rule. CYA is a big term in the military, and you should definitely do it if you are worried about if it's probationary, if it's job-wise. I mean, try to clear it with them as best you can and communicate that it's therapeutic, that you're trying to do it responsibly. But that's just the state of affairs as it is. And yeah, you may have, it's definitely a non-zero possibility that you may test positive for THC with any CBD supplement. But yes, absolutely, isolate would be the best or the most protective. Therapeutically, this is very hard to answer because the FDA gags us very much on going very in depth on it. And the difference between isolate and broad and full spectrum, when you look at the entourage effect, definitely causes a different efficacy level. We've seen with Epidiolex and a lot of other medications that use CBD isolate that they are absolutely therapeutically useful. Is it, when you get to full spectrum, is it 10 times stronger? Is it 2 times stronger? Is it 50 times stronger? We don't know yet. And beyond that, biology, there's no controls. Everybody's ECS is slightly different. So to say how I'm going to respond to it is very different than you. Dealing with the medical side, we saw about 20% of people just had no response whatsoever, like did not help them. And it's really broke our hearts, but at least we didn't have negative side effects, similar to the level of when you look at anti-epilepsy medication. It's savage, the things that these kids go through. So to have something of like, we hope it works, and if it doesn't, I mean, it sucks, but it's not going to cause organ failure. Like, you're not going to deal with some of the other things that may be caused by those therapeutics. The inverse of that, we had 20% that we referred to as the super responders. And on that level, you have people with 50 plus seizures a day going to 0. And that's the stuff that, like, really, I mean, I've been a skeptic every step of the way. I have to admit, I called CBD duels for weed. I thought it was a joke until I saw it. I really saw these kids that were living in dependent care and just weren't going to have a proper social life. And now they're getting driver's license, which means 6 months in Texas. You have to go without an epileptic seizure to get your driver's license. They're picking out colleges. I mean, it's really stuff that, like, I have to stop because I'll start to choke up. But it's that kind of stuff is like, okay, I'm in this for the long haul. This is what we're doing.
It's life-changing for sure.
It is. It really is. And to have that impact. And then like between those two 20%, obviously there's a spectrum of different variable responses. But yeah, I'd say for CBD isolate, I mean, anti-epilepsy, antimicrobial, anti-inflammatory, there's definitely a lot of anecdotal evidence for any and all of the above. I personally prefer full spectrum through and through, but that's not an option for everybody. So
right.
Try it. Do what you can to find a cost-effective source, titrate up and down, find what dosage works for you or has an impact. And yeah, do the best you can.
Start low and go slow, yes. Right?
Keep a journal.
Yeah.
Keep an eye on your food intake, your sleep out. Nobody's going to check all the boxes. Nobody's going to do a full, like, cover everything. But when I give CBD to somebody, like my uncle, he's had some serious neurological issues, and it wasn't about what it does for you today. Does it take it every day, morning and evening? We'll work on your dosages, but in a week or 2 weeks, we'll talk about how you're sleeping, how you're eating. And he, without even realizing it, a week or two into it, he's like, man, I haven't slept 8 hours straight in 20 years. It's happened now, it's happening. And it's those little subtle quality of life differences that is a majority of CBD users are going to see. Of course, if you're an epileptic, that's life-changing immediately. You're going to see an immediate effect. But for the average user who's using it as a health supplement, you're going to see gradual effects. You want a daily intake. And yeah, really keep an eye on yourself. And it's great for overall health fitness too, because once you start paying that much attention to your sleep and your diet, you're going to start exercising more. You're going to start, it's funny how it snowballs, and you really do start to take care of yourself. That's what I always give my mom a hard time, that she does a lot of fad diets. And I'm like, it's not necessarily that this diet is working, it's that you're paying attention. And once you really start to put that effort into taking care of your body, it starts to overflow and overlap into other aspects. And I don't know, I love it. I get excited about it.
Awesome. Well, one last question for you. Jackie is talking about CBD products, and a lot of people think that in Texas, you're only allowed to have products made from CBD isolate. And, you have been in the lab in the medical side and now on the hemp side. Can you talk about, what is the reality of what these products are being made from?
So yeah, I mean, essentially CBD isolate, like you said, it's the easiest one as far as regulatory. It's the most accepted. It's the most consistent product. There's a lot of positives to it, but when you look at the anecdotal and some published, it's really hard. Israel has some great library of some past research, because they're ahead of us on the legalization curve for research. But absolutely, excuse me, THC is legal in Texas. You need to ensure that you're not crossing that 0.3% cap, because the penalty is very severe. And like I said, I put out a Delta 9 THC product myself. And to say that we had sit downs with many law firms and covered every single regulatory base, because we expect a lot of inspections looking into it. But yeah, and not only THC, but look into your minor cannabinoids. I mean, CBC, CBG, there's THCV, there's a lot of these things that are being cultivated and being made available retail that it's brutal to slog through. But if you can find some sources of these things and be able to experiment and find what works for you and what doesn't, we on the manufacturing and research side are the same way. I love talking to somebody, say, what have you done? How did it impact you? What are you taking? What have you not heard of? It's like, I mean, it's a whole new conversation with everybody. Like there's no blanket, there's no umbrella conversation you can have with two patients. So when it comes to THC and other minors, absolutely. So, like, check out broad spectrum, check out full spectrum if you are, I mean, able to put that in your system and not worry about legal issues. But yeah, definitely open that door, because if you just leave it as CBD, that's, I mean, such a small percentage of the potential of this medicine.
Awesome. And I'm so excited that you're having this conversation here tonight, because as an Air Force veteran, a lot of veterans, they just have closed themselves out and are not aware of all of these benefits. So for us to be able to speak out and say, you know, hey, look, this leading with science, education, this is a really big deal. So I'm so happy that you were able to knock out that information as an Air Force veteran. I mean, I got to keep throwing that out there because I'm excited about it, and from Texas. So awesome. Thank you so much, Geoff. So moving right along, next we're going to have Jax Finkel, is the Executive Director for Texas NORML, the Austin chapter of the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, having also served as volunteer coordinator, political legislative director, and deputy director. She has been involved in cannabis law reform since 2005 and has been an official board member since 2006. In her tenure, Jax has given hundreds of interviews, participated in many panel discussions, and speaking engagements. She innovated the first ever cannabis-centric voters guide in 2012 and continues to prepare the Texas NORML voters guide for each election season. She helps spearhead the first Texas chapter training. She believes in freely sharing information and facilitating organizational growth. She created the curriculum and helped organize and execute several dozen regional advocacy trainings between 2015 to present. And she works closely with Texans for Responsible Marijuana Policy and the coalition partners, along with many other cannabis groups. Jax is often at the Capitol, which I can vouch for that, so can everyone else, pushing for cannabis law reform and building relationships with our legislators. Cannabis law reform is her passion. Please welcome Jax Finkel.
It's me. I was the ghost voice everyone was hearing a moment ago. Thank you for everybody watching on Facebook and here with us on Zoom. I've been tracking both of the conversations here, and we have a lot going on at the Capitol. We have never had so many bills moving so far before. And so I just want to come first from a place of gratitude that we are having such movement during a session that we anticipated to be so very difficult because of the pandemic, because of the winter storms, because of the broadband issues that they're working on, a myriad of things that have been priorities. And I feel very fortunate that we are seeing some really great headway. Historically, we've only seen, one bill head over to the Senate originally for medical, and then medical and hemp advancing to the Senate. But now we have over 4 bills that are actually in the Senate, and we have several other bills that are on their way. So I want to just give kind of a high level overview of what's going on. And real quick on the Zoom chat, I'm going to drop a link. And this link is an update on the bills with actions that you can take on each one for the Lieutenant Governor and the Senate. So in Texas, as you guys know, we don't have ballot initiatives, so we are reliant on our state legislators. And basically the way that it works is bills typically move through the House and then into the Senate and then to the governor's desk. So the first bill I want to talk about is HB 2593, which was passed by the Texas House with a vote of 108 to 33. It's authored by Speaker Pro Tem Joe Moody, and it would reduce the possession of 2 ounces of THC concentrate from the current penalty of a felony down to a Class B misdemeanor. So that is in the Senate, and we are waiting for the Lieutenant Governor to assign it to committee. That link that I dropped there has an action that you can just click and send an email to the Lieutenant Governor and the Texas senators. Then I want to talk about reduction of penalties for flower possession. There's HB 441, which passed out of the Texas House with a vote of 88 to 40, and it would reduce penalties for 1 ounce from the current B to a class C, which of course is better, but not fully decriminalized, which we would like to see. But some ways to get around some of the issues with the class C is that it will disallow arrests, and it also allows for an expunction process to be set up. So that's very important. Then moving on to medical cannabis, HB 1535 passed the Texas House with a vote of 134 to 12. As amended, this legislation would change terminal cancer to cancer. It would add chronic pain, and it would add PTSD. We mentioned earlier, you know, when I was talking with Geoff, it would raise the THC cap from 0.5% THC to 5% THC, which would reduce some of that harmful carrier effect that patients do experience. And then it would also create these IRBs, or an institutional review board, and that facilitates research, and it would also track the impact of medical cannabis on patients. Because when we're asked, what about the research? You know, we're like, Israel, you know, Colorado, California, Washington, we're laying it out there. And they're like, but where's the Texas research? So that is very important that we address that, and this will do so while also continuing to add people to the program. Also, I want to note that HB 3948, which is the hemp cleanup bill, passed the Texas House by 132 to 13. It does some cleanup in the statute to make state regulations match USDA regulations. There was some discussion of the addition of Delta 8 into products, which was removed in the committee substitute, but it does also include higher institutions doing research. So that is extremely important. So these are the 4 bills that are in the Senate right now, waiting for action on from the Lieutenant Governor. There is one bill of note, HB 567, and that enshrines parental protection so that parents who have children enrolled in the Texas Compassionate Use Program would not be able to be harassed by CPS. That bill has passed the House and the Senate, so we are just waiting on the governor to sign that when the time comes. I want to also highlight a few bills of note. HB 3722 is by Republican Chairman James White, and it does a lot of good things in one little bill. And it takes possession of cannabis flower and concentrates, and it reduces both of those penalties. It also allows you to kind of get one get out of free jail card for possession of paraphernalia. And it also allows for this expunction of the arrest record, which is really important. Also, HB 99 by Republican Representative Steve Toth would take 2 ounces of cannabis or less. It would disallow arrest, and it would prevent that suspension of driver's license, which is really harmful to people who are being penalized for possession of a plant. And then the last one I want to highlight is HB 4307. And what this would do is it would allow for the Texas State Health Benefit Program to include Texas Compassionate Use formulations under their coverage. So this means that it would be added to the benefit plan for governmental employees. It's been scheduled for the local and consent calendar on Saturday. And for those of you who aren't familiar, local and consent calendar is a bunch of bills that nobody opposes, and so they just adopt them all at once. So it's a lot of things that are going on. A lot of things are moving. I was up at the Capitol the other day, and we delivered binders to all of the Health and Human Service Committee members on the Senate side. Heather Fazio, my counterpart with Texans for Responsible Marijuana Policy, stopped by State Affairs and dropped off information about all of the penalty reductions. And then we were there with volunteers today doing an action alert for all senators, letting them know about these bills that are coming over to the Senate right now. So there's a lot of games, not a lot of games. I'm sure there are a lot of games. Guys, it's the legislature. There's definitely games. But let me just say, there's a lot of balls in play right now, and we are juggling them. And hopefully we will be able to see really significant change. I feel strongly that medical cannabis will be able to be improved. We have a lot of work to garner the support that we need in the Senate to make sure that we can get these penalty reductions through. And so it's extremely important that we do not let up. There are some deadlines coming out that our bills have to make it out of the House within about the next week for them to be viable to pass through the process. So we cannot rest at all for the next 3 weeks. The legislature ends on May 31st. That is like just over 3 weeks away, and it's such a short amount of time, and so many things have to happen. So I would like for you guys to click that link. Oh, Dr. Johnson, thank you for I just messaged it just to you. Thank you for sending that to everybody. Please make sure you click that link right there, participate in the action alerts, and please help us be able to get these bills passed. So Anita, that's all I have. I really appreciate you making sure that I could give an update to everybody on what's going on up at the Capitol.
Yes, thank you, Queen. Oh my goodness. I mean, she was there. She's always there. I mean, do you sleep there? Because I know that you've gone back to back with little to no sleep, maybe a nap. So I just want to just say shout out to Jax, because when it comes to the moves that need to be made in policy with cannabis, she's on it. I can't say that enough. So if you're interested in knowing what to do, just like she put that link down here, taking action is huge. And Texas NORML is a great organization to understand and know about cannabis and policy. That's exactly why I am a part of Texas NORML, lifetime member, in fact, just because as a scientist, the cannabis policy was never really my thing. I didn't really understand the process, but with all of their advocacy and helps and meetings and everything that they've been doing, even with every single, hit from, like you said, with the winter and the COVID and all the things, they've still managed to be up there and making moves. So thank you so much, Jax, for all you do and all your hard work. It looks like we're going pretty fast on time this evening. So maybe if we wanted to ask, put it out there one more time, if anybody had any other questions for either of our speakers, for anyone for that matter, it's open right now. If not, then I can go ahead and wrap it up and bring it to a close. Is there anything on Facebook?
There is. So a little bit of clarification, if we could, from you, Geoff. So you mentioned that there are, in general, 4 ways that you can do extraction. CO2 is the most optimal, correct? And then ethanol, you were saying, was another one. And then I think you mentioned butane, which is like, oh, we got to do some extra to clean it up afterwards. What was the 4th one?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, I touched on that at the very beginning, but physical rosin press.
Is that the heat press?
There's a couple different forms of technology for it. It's like Sweet Sensei in Austin. Greg Autry does that work here in Texas.
I saw Kelly Lloyd today, and he was talking about what Sweet Sensei is doing. He was at the Capitol volunteering, so.
So they're kind of it's not, I wouldn't call it an exception, but kind of the most unique of the 4, specifically because, well, A, it's safe. I mean, it's just squeezing the plant, but it's essentially very low efficiency. I could, probably get about double the CBD out of a flower with CO2 and ethanol. So it generally drives the prices higher. It is argued in marketing that is more of a whole plant material. I don't necessarily want to assert my opinion on that. That is that's not my expertise. I work with CO2 exclusively. But yeah, and butane would fall under, hydrocarbons. So there's propane, there's a bunch of basically hydrocarbons, explosives. Like that's really where you get a lot of shatter as well, because THCA, to the solid form of THC, needs to be extracted, and ethanol and CO2 generally decarboxylate. So when you see shatter, waxes, things like that of THC, usually you're looking at hydrocarbon extractions. But yes, I apologize. Yeah, physical so rosin press is,
we squish it. We squish it all out.
Cold water, cold press. Yeah, whereas the other ones are solubility based. This one is just pressure based.
Force. All right.
Right.
And Dr. Johnson, and actually you too, Anita, you might have a response to this, but I think I saw Dr. Johnson mentioning a few more efficacy points about what CBD does. Oh, but she's stepping away for, okay, we got her back. So if you wanted to maybe just highlight a few of those real quick, Dr. Johnson?
Sure, actually, so I have my background is actually a little bit of the opposite of Geoff's. I actually work with older adults or elderly. So what we found is that Parkinson's also is it's very helpful for Parkinson's, for the very similar same thing as epilepsy with the shaking. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing that it's very much how Geoff describes epilepsy, where it's almost like it's not instant, but it's very close to almost an instant reaction, where you could see somebody shaking excessively, and then you could see them finally being able to grab a glass of water, which is just mind-blowing. And but between that and in elderly homes or skilled nursing facilities, combativeness is a huge issue. It's mostly usually due to dementia, and they don't know where they are, so they're very, very frightened, and so if you're frightened and you've got somebody trying to feed you something, you don't know who they are or what you're doing there, you're going to be a little bit frightened, and you're going to be trying to push them, bite them, kick them. And so what the CBD is able to do is just calm them. And it's amazing. It calms them enough to be able to kind of rationalize, okay, I'm safe, I'm calm, nobody's hurting me. And then it allows them to eat, to make sure that they're eating their food, to make sure that they're taking their medications. So CBD is really effective for that. It's great for anxiety and what I was explaining is THC is more brain and the CBD is more periphery. I mean, it does go both ways at times, but so when you're feeling like, oh my God, my heart's racing, oh my God, I don't know what to do, CBD is phenomenal for that. That's like what it's supposed to do, is it actually physically relaxes your body, relaxes your muscles. And that's why it's also really great for pain, because it causes that calming, relaxing effect, and it allows you to get over the anxiety. Now, if your brain is chirping, you do need some THC, because it's similarly to how a benzo would react, where you need to quiet the brain and quiet the signaling to the brain to be able to then, utilize it. But that is more of a THC effect. But CBD in general is very effective. It actually is also quite effective for, I hate to say this because I don't like using like street terms, but for people who get munchies or hungry from THC, or I guess Delta 8, I'm assuming has a very similar property to it. The best thing is CBD actually curbs those appetites. So for people who are wanting, for weight loss, it's very helpful. It also helps, again, calms your heart rate, calms your body. It's really good for people with hypertension, high blood pressure. So there's so many ways that it can be utilized. It just needs to make sure that it's being monitored by somebody to make sure that you're not going crazy one way or the other. And just like Geoff said, it all depends on, they all can be effective, but from what I've seen from my patients, the broad or full spectrum, anything that comes directly from the plant. And you got to be very careful, because there are a lot of companies that will say something is broad spectrum, meaning it has everything but THC, but it's all isolates individually, like isolate terpenes, isolate this, isolate that. And so if you're looking for the original extraction, it's not necessarily the same thing as separate isolates getting added to a bottle. So it's just, look where the product's coming from and kind of really look into it. Isolates can be great. And don't get me wrong, like they can absolutely be effective. But for those looking for the full plant benefit, including the terpenes, which are quite effective for a lot of ailments, you really want to make sure that they're getting extracted all together. And CO2 is an amazing extraction method for it. It really does get all the cannabinoids, which is so great. So, I would just say, just make sure that you're checking your products, but CBD is always where I start patients on, and I only add the THC once indications show that they need it.
Y'all, this could not have been a more timely conversation.
Can I add in a couple minutes on there? There's a couple points in which I want to. So CBC is awesome for appetite suppressants. That's another newer one that's not really pinging on a lot of people's radars, but for diabetics especially, I highly recommend looking into a CBC product and seeing the impact of that on your diagnoses. And then exactly like Dr. Leah was hitting on, elderly care spasticity is awesome with CBD. Neurological plaque. Again, this is anecdotal. I can't say for sure, but that is another thing that is supposed to ease aging and dementia. But then it was really when you hit on aggression that definitely, I forgot, I left out autism as a multiple diagnosis with a lot of our patients. Communicating and aggression, again, we weren't able to attribute it to a specific cannabinoid. I can't say if it was the THC, if it was the CBD, what specifically it was, but we had an incredible amount of success with lowering aggression levels and previously nonverbal, non-communicative, not necessarily, I mean, just completely vegetative, but yeah, just antisocial 1,000%, starting to make eye contact, starting to get curious, starting to interact more. And it was things like that. They were like, oh, big, like, we have so much more work to do to figure it out, but it's man, yeah, those are things that I highly recommend testing in a safe manner if you have that available in those diagnoses.
And CBN.
Yes.
I live near one of the largest senior communities in the nation. Sun City is not far away, and it's like 10,000 seniors. And I mean, when we first saw the vents there, standing room only. Like, I've never been told, you've got too many people for fire marshal code. We got told fire marshal code, like we couldn't have any more people. Like, it was crazy. So I think that a lot of people are wanting to try something, moving away from, the pills. And I like how Anita put it, the pill load, reducing that pill load is extremely important. And, I hear a lot of people saying, what about the research? And yes, we need research because we want to be able to target these cannabinoids and these terpenes at the conditions like lasers, absolutely. But the research should never be hindering access because of the proven efficacy and safety profile. So these are not either or, they are in conjunction, and we can make sure that people are having safe access while also doing the research. So one day we can look at your genetic code or whatever and come up with the perfect little cannabis tincture for you, And that's all the questions that we've got, Anita. You guys like knocked them all out.
Awesome. Thank you so much again to our speakers. You all did a great job. I love having the cannabis science conversation because everyone's a molecular chemist now. I mean, seriously, everyone's asking these questions. So we got to up the game and have these molecular answers. So just like science is forever evolving, I mean, the regulation of the compounds of the cannabis plant kind of are as well. So although we may be confident talking about Delta-9 and CBD because they're the dominant phytocannabinoids in cannabis, this is just the tip of the iceberg because there is so much left to learn still. I mean, again, I can't say it enough that we're all in this and learning together. I truly hope that you learned at least one fun fact this evening. And if you want to learn all things cannabis policy, please join Texas Normal. Once again, I am the CBD Genie, your cannabis science communicator, and I can be reached via Instagram at cbd.genie. Let's get connected because I'm all about collabing. We all need to work together and we can really move mountains together. So my passion at your service. Thank you for your time and attention. Have a wonderful evening, CannaFam.
Thank you, Geoff. Thank you, Dr. Leah. Y'all rock.
Thank you, Jax.
Thank you, Anita. Bye, guys.